Suddenly you realize something and you can't sort of unsee it, you know. It's like, oh wait, that's why that's like that. Yes, so metta to insight, or the way of metta that we're talking about this week. We talked a little bit, last week Amar Pushpa and I talked a bit about what metta is, not just a feeling, but also a kind of rational understanding, if you like, a perspective on the world, even a positive intention or action. What I want to talk about this week is something that's a bit more about the entire path, in a way, if you like, the spiritual path of which metta is a really big part of. So yeah, if you like, the goal of Buddhism, if you like, if you put it that grandly, is to bring ourselves in line with reality. So that might sound a bit mysterious or a bit grand in a way, but if we think about our lives, a lot of the things that cause us suffering, or all of the things that cause us suffering, I would argue, come out of a mismatch between how we want things to be and how things really are. You know, the fundamental realities of existence are that things are impermanent, things change, things don't go the way we want to, people aren't the way we want them to be, and all, you know, the nature of ourself, maybe we're not quite who we want to be either. And that difference between how things are and what we want is the cause of our unhappiness, the cause of our suffering. So Buddhism says is that some of these things you can't change, but what you can change is your relationship to the world. Yeah, you can change your relationship to the world. And if you can change your relationship to the world completely, then it's possible to exist in a state where there is no suffering. Yeah, there's no separation between you and reality. You're just completely accepting of things as they happen and not all the unfolding processes. So if you like, the goal of Buddhism, the goal of the path, the goal of the spiritual path in Buddhism is to reach a state, what we'd call enlightenment, or rather a place of peace and contentment, acceptance about the way things really are. So yeah, this way, if you like, this path has also been described as the path of the good, or to aim for the good, if you like. But it's not about just doing good deeds or good acts, or it's also not about sort of a blind faith or a sort of piety, but really it comes down to a skill, practicing Buddhist, the Buddhist path requires great skill, and that includes a kind of an intellectual, rational understanding, rational appreciation, as much as it involves a kind of wholeheartedness and engagement of our energies. So specifically, we've been talking about the path of metta here, but in this series. But what I want to try and get across is that the path of metta is all of those things. It's about metta as we translated it last week as a kind of loving kindness or a good intention, a good will. That can be a kind of internal emotion and process, but it can also be a kind of act, if you see what I mean. Having goodwill to others and actually goodwill to ourselves is about having about acting in accordance with what is good. And I don't just mean what is good in the eyes of society or what is good in the eyes of your friends or your family, although that may be some of it, but it's really what is good in terms of what is helpful in terms of growth, what is helpful in terms of spiritual development, both for yourself and for other people. Yeah. So yeah, it's not just about emotion and feeling. It's very much about also a rational appreciation or a reflection on what is good. What are skillful acts? What are good acts for us to do? We'll be talking a bit more about that next week. But yeah, I'm just trying to sort of lay out a bit more of the whole path for you. But this whole series is based on an ancient Buddhist teaching, and in a certain way it's inspired by this teaching, called the Metta Sutta. And in that sutta just means, it actually translates as thread, so it's just a sort of story or a parable. That's literally in this Metta Sutta that we're been inspired by this series. It very much talks about how one might act if they are choosing to follow the spiritual path. And I'll read that to you, or read a translation of that to you, before I bring in my friend Adam and have a discussion in a few minutes' time. But anyway, that will give you a bit of an idea about what this means in a bit more detail. But yeah, specifically this skillfulness, this Buddhist practice is, if you like, another way of thinking about it, it's a kind of training in skillfulness in order to kind of really embody that sense of, enlightenment, insight, the goal, however you want to call it. We need to train ourselves in skillful acts of the body, skillful acts of speech, and skillful acts of mind. But it's really worth just saying that these have been a core part of Buddhist practice since the very beginning, but they're definitely not presented in terms of like a commandments or one must, if you see what I mean. In terms of thinking about skillfulness, it's always a kind of encouragement. It's always very much a kind of principle or precept that we try to aspire to a little more every day. I mean, if you're anything like myself, my ideals of behaviour are much further ahead than my acts of behaviour, if you see what I mean. So there's always a bit of a gap, but I guess what we're trying to do is to constantly see what our aspirations are and try to move towards them a bit more each day. So in that way, Buddhist practice is like a training. It's like a practice. Each day we try to improve our skillfulness, our skillful behaviour. But we must use our own, we can't just rely on teachings or reading ancient texts in order to work out how we can be more skillful. What the information that we use, or the information we have available to us, is our experience and our intellect. So what do we think, given all we know, what do we think is going to be skillful? What do we think is going to be useful? And then what actually happens? What actually happens? So if we're talking about metta, this goodwill to ourselves or to others, if we, say that there's somebody, for instance, that you're not getting on with, whether that's at home, maybe you're locked down with somebody that you're having difficulties with at the moment, a family member or a friend or a housemate, or maybe you're working with somebody you don't get on with. If you have an idea that being more pleasant and kind towards them might help you and might help them grow in a sort of spiritual way, in a way, even if you don't think of yourself as spiritual, you could try it. And if that experience bears out that action, if indeed that your relationship does begin to thaw and that you do start to have better communication, you can relate more to one another as human beings, well, then you've got a bit of information to help you be more skillful again in future. That actually being kinder helps relationships, helps improve relationships, and helps improve communication. So on the basis of our knowledge and our experience, we try to keep on developing, keep on growing. And I wanted to say a little bit about the Buddha. You may or may not know about the Buddha. The Buddha was a historical figure in India 2,500 years ago that was said to have achieved enlightenment, and therefore, and then spent the next 40 years of his life teaching others how to also become enlightened. But in Buddhist, in Buddhist tradition, he's venerated to a great deal. Some might even say worshipped. But it's very different. It may look very similar to a kind of theistic religion whereby there's a god or something, but the Buddha is definitely not a god. He's just a man. And so the respect that Buddhists have for the Buddha is one of someone who's helped them along the way. So I was thinking about this the other day. You don't actually need a Buddha to be a Buddhist, or you don't actually need a Buddha to be a Buddhist, to practice Buddhism. it's sort of obviously very helpful to have somebody like the Buddha as an example, or even the archetype of a Buddha to have an example. But as the Buddha did himself, you don't actually need a Buddha to help you get enlightened. It is supposedly possible to do this completely on your own, or, well, at least by, probably with the influence of others around you, but broadly on your own, just by using those two elements of your intellect and your experience. Yeah, so working out in a certain way, finding out by trial and error what acts and behaviour most conduces to development, to spiritual growth. Of course, it's really handy to have somebody who's already done it to show you the way. Very, very handy. But in principle, you wouldn't need the help of anybody else around you. I mean, I guess the metaphor of the Buddha would be someone like if you were lost in a jungle, if you've been lost in a jungle for several days, and you were hungry and thirsty and were wandering around completely lost, and then suddenly you came across the man who gave you a map to the closest town, you'd be deeply grateful to that person, if you see what I mean. And that is the same kind of feeling that Buddhists would have towards the Buddha. He's someone who laid out a path or the way to enlightenment, gave you a map and gave you some signposts to help you along the way, but he's not actually, you don't necessarily need his physical presence in order to help you. So yeah, that's what I wanted to, that's all I'm going to say right now. But so the way of metta, if you like, is a path of using a path of skillfulness, a path of training, a path of using our intellect and our experience, both our emotional experience and our objective experience, in order to find a way of helping ourselves and others grow. We're delighted you could join me, Adam. Yeah,
delighted to be here.
Yeah, nice to have you here. Yeah, Adam's a good friend of mine. We live together in a Buddhist community. So yeah, I'd be very interested to see what you've got to say about this theme in a minute. But I just wondered if I could read you the Karyana Metta Sutta, first of all, and read people at home as well. They who are skilled in their good, who wish to attain the state of calm, should act thus. They should be upright, perfectly upright, of noble speech, gentle and humble, content, easily supported with few duties, of light livelihood, with senses calm, discreet, not impudent, not greedily attached to families. They should not pursue the slightest thing for which other wise people might censure them. May all beings be secure, may their hearts be wholesome. Whatever living beings there be, feeble, strong, tall, stout, medium, short, small or large, without exception, seen or unseen, those dwelling far or near, those who are born or those who are to be born, may all beings be happy. Let none deceive another, nor despise any person whatsoever in any place. Let them not wish harm to another out of anger or ill will. Just as a mother would protect her only child at the risk of her own life, even so, let them cultivate a boundless heart towards all beings. Let their thoughts of boundless love pervade the whole world, above, below, and across, without any obstruction, without any hatred, without any enmity. Whether they stand, walk, sit, lie down, as long as they're awake, they should develop this mindfulness. This, they say, is the noblest living here. Not falling to wrong views, being virtuous and endowed with insight, by discarding attachment to sense desires, may they never again be reborn.
I mean, hearing that, it's sort of, you referenced a map earlier, and it almost sounds like a map, and it's almost very, hearing those words sound very conducive to a response of metta. Yeah, wonderful words.
I really like this this kind of teaching, because it's so sort of, I mean, it's got some big ideas in it, but it's quite straightforward in a way. You know, you just cultivate this love, you know, and of course, maybe you can't have a boundless love for all beings to start with, but I think we can all probably resonate with that sense of a mother's love for the child in a way, you know, and it's like the practice is just to extend that quality of love to all, you know, ultimately, as big as ask as that is.
Yes, yeah. Sort of that sense of solidarity between all human beings. I think all above, below, everywhere.
Very good. And so what do you think about this idea of training, Buddhist part? I mean, you've been a Buddhist practitioner yourself now for some years.
Well, I think training is a key part of it. I think without training, one doesn't change. One stays stale in their own habits and ways of being. So I think this idea of sort of training principle is key, sort of fundamental to the Buddhist path. So I think it's quite aspiring. I mean, it's not, you know, in training, it's not something that's going to be necessarily easy, sort of implied in training, but still something to aspire to do.
So what does that sort of look like? I mean, day to day. I mean, we've talked a lot about a grand idea of enlightenment, but I wonder if people will be interested in like what does it actually mean? What does it actually mean to practice Buddhism? Like, you know, day to day, like how do you train yourself when you get up in the morning? Or
I mean, I was actually reflecting on what you were saying earlier in your beginning 10-minute talk, and I was thinking almost that metta could be seen as a guide, as a compass. So in my day-to-day interactions with people and things I do, the more sense or experience of metta that I can be in touch with, it's almost that's the compass pointing north towards enlightenment, to which I can go. So the more I can sense or experience metta day to day, is I feel the more I'm heading in the right direction, really. And although of course it's not always pointing in that direction, but I certainly can experience it in my body through the things that I say, the acts that I make, and even the thoughts that I think as well.
And it is just the small things, isn't it? Quite often, like you know, making a cup of tea for somebody, or you know, making some lunch today. You know, like just like it, you know, it can just be an expression of that, rather than just taking care of yourself. It can be like just a slight extension to what you're doing to take in another. Is enough to train that aspect. If you sort of, I sort of think of it like that. Again, I'm not always there in a way. Like, I don't always feel like doing it. And sometimes I think that's where the training thing is very useful, isn't it? Because you don't always want to do it. You don't always want to give that little bit more. But it's usually good when you do.
Absolutely, and you say it's usually good. I think that brings in the rational element. So immediately after you get that feedback from doing something like making lunch for somebody or a cup of tea, and then immediately be like, oh wow, look at the impact that had, and you can rationally see the training and the progress that you made in doing such a thing.
Yeah, I mean, when I don't know about you, but you know, when I talk about the Metta Bhavana to other people, the Metta Bhavana practice, you know, cultivating particularly these kind of this goodwill in meditation or otherwise, I often say it's the most transformative practice. You know, like it doesn't seem very big in a way, just wishing people well, but it can be really transformative in, you know, relationships and so on, friendships, and particularly with difficult people. I wondered if you would agree with me or not, you know, whether you find the Metta Bhavana transformative and whether it has indeed transformed any really challenging relationships of yours.
Definitely. I mean, transformed in lots of sort of different ways, in a larger scale and a smaller scale. And my main sort of practice is that if I hadn't have done it, I suppose, to start there, then I stay in a restricted, confined sort of emotions, such as anger or anxiety or things like that, towards and around situations and people that I find difficult. And my experience has definitely been one of transformative, in the sense that the next encounter with that person or people is different. It's no doubt something has changed through that wishing them well, or cultivating metta towards them. So in short, yeah, absolutely, I would say it is transformative, and I actually can't think of anything else that would sort of transform it even more so in a way. It's sort of the foundational element to bring to being in a better relation with others.
Yeah, great. Yeah, you got anything else?
Well, I really liked, on this subject or
anything.
I really liked when you were talking about how you could either, it's the tension that's what causes us suffering, is that tension between what between reality and what we want, and we can either change everything around us to suit what we want, which is just the idea of that is extremely challenging, to get everything, every person, everything all the way you want it, or come more into accordance of reality.
I'm sure we've all tried that, haven't we? Trying to arrange our lives to be just perfect, or it never lasts very long.
Doesn't stick.
No. So what was it particularly that, in a way, interested you about that, or you thought, was there something I guess I was thinking that for me is a helpful reflection. So like when I was thinking about today, I read some of the material on this, and it said, the way of metta is about bringing oneself in line with reality. And I guess I thought, what does that mean? What does that mean? And then, it's of course, I want things to be this way, but things aren't that way. So in a certain way, I wonder if that's just like almost a perfect example of this way of metta. Do you know what I mean? It's just a way of thinking about, okay, where am I in this, and what's it really about? Do you see what I mean? A kind of an opportunity for insight to arise. Because it's not just about feeling. It's not just about feeling kind of positive, is it? It is about having that kind of moments or flashes of kind of insight. I don't know whether it's worth saying kind of what insight is in a way.
Definitely what insight is. I suppose insight would be, I guess anything that lends itself towards seeing reality or how things work naturally, or I don't know if that makes sense. I think.
I sort of like, often when I have it's not always a big insight, is it? It can just be a little insight, but often you see things in a slightly different way afterwards. You sort of have that experience whereby like suddenly you realise something and you can't sort of unsee it. It's like, oh wait, that's why that's like that.
I always think that when you said you can't unsee it, if you try to change things around you to make what you want, they break. You don't continue the progress. The progress isn't compounded. It's constantly breaking down. Whereas the insights that you make, you can't undo them. So it's a continual progression, so that they don't break down.
That sounds like an insight.
It had a quality of insight as I was saying it.
That's good.
Yeah.
Good. Great. So I hope you enjoyed that Dharma Night talk. So if you did enjoy it, if you're enjoying our videos, I just want to ask you or encourage you to think about making a donation to the Brixton Buddhist community. We're a UK charity that relies completely on your donations to run everything here. And if this was a meditation class, there'd be a donation bowl that you could just put in £10 at the end of the night to help support the activities. But as you're watching this online, I just want to ask you to think about making an online donation. If you've watched 4 or 5 videos this month, maybe you might want to think about giving £10. So there's a link in the description below where you can go to our website and make a donation. And if you want to keep giving and you don't want to worry about making that donation every month, well, you could just set up a monthly standing order. That would be really, really helpful. I want to suggest something of the region of maybe £10 or £20 a month if you're able to do that. And that would be really, really helpful and help us keep producing videos like this one. Thanks for listening. Take care of yourself.